Hi, everybody. My name is Sherry, and I'm an event host for Bank Square Books and Savoy Bookshop and Cafe. We are so delighted that you're able to tune in to this evening's virtual event. Few pieces of business before we begin. We'd like to call attention to a few helpful features on Crowdcast. You can chat in where it says "Say something nice." You can also ask a question for our author by submitting them through the Ask a Question button. Also, I'll be monitoring the chat, so if you put them in the chat, I will see them there also. If you're watching on Facebook Live, we won't be able to see your questions, but you can join the Crowdcast at any point using the link in the pinned comment. Last, if you're having trouble with the stream, you'll see a little question mark on the top right that will help you troubleshoot any issues you might be experiencing. If you'd like to purchase a book, you can do so through the green button down below the video stream. It'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Books ordered through the link from tonight's event will come with a signed book plate. And note, due to the nature of event sales, it will take us a few extra days to fulfill your orders, but we'll get them shipped out or made available for pickup as soon as we can. Now, I'm delighted to introduce another installation of our Read of the Day book club, put on in partnership with the New London Day. This month, we're happy to be hosting Wendy Walker to discuss Don't Look for Me. Wendy will be in conversation with Rick Coster, an arts columnist at the Day and Read of the Day champion. Rick has been working as an arts and culture writer for the Day for over 20 years. He specializes in covering music, books, and dining, and writes a weekly humor column known as Rick's List, and is an all-around stand-up guy. I'm also really happy to introduce Wendy Walker, author of Don't Look for Me. She's the author of the psychological suspense novels All Is Not Forgotten, In the Night Before, and Don't Look for Me. Her novels have been translated into 23 foreign languages and top bestseller lists both nationally and abroad. They've been selected by the Reese Witherspoon Book Club, the Today Show, and the Book of the Month Club, and have been optioned for both television and film. As a former family law attorney with training in child advocacy, Wendy draws from her knowledge of trauma and psychology to write compelling, complex characters and stories. Publishers Weekly says Don't Look for Me has distinctive, well-developed characters that complement the skillfully paced plot. This moving look at the bond between a mother and her children reinforces Walker's place at the top of the genre. And Criminal Element says the story is very much enriched by this rich psychological background, just like in the author's 3 previous books. If you want to take your psychological thriller reading to a higher and deeper level, then you need to read Wendy Walker. Wendy and Rick will speak for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions that have been submitted through the question button. And now I'll turn it over to Wendy and Rick.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Thank you, Wendy, for being here. It's nice to see you, at least on screen, because we have certainly talked a couple of times over the years, and it's nice to have you with us tonight.
Thanks. It's great.
And thanks to all y'all for tuning in. This is we're almost at the 1 year part for the Read of the Day book club. And it's so weird that we had one actual live event and then the virus hit. So this is becoming the norm as opposed to the norm being the norm, if that makes any sense. So now I have to say that when there was an article in Sunday's paper that I wrote based on an interview with Wendy about Don't Look for Me. And I had to be honest with Wendy when I spoke with her, because I think it's a point of pride and duty to me when I interview an author that it's incumbent on me to read the material. It's only fair if someone like Wendy is going to give her time generously to us. I don't want to be one of those people that says, I have no idea what your book is, but let's talk a minute But the thing is, it was one of those weeks where there was like 4 author interviews, and I said, Wendy, I'm on page 207, so don't say anything that's going to blow the ending. And you didn't, and I thought you were at one point, but I do want to say that now I'm done. Now I know what the twist was, and if I may cuss, you fooled the hell out of me. So it worked. So anyway, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I've been dying to hear what you thought of the ending, so it's great.
Yes. Well, I'll send you an email because I can't blow it for all these folks out here. And so we've got a lot to talk about because the thing that we have veered off into both times that I have interviewed you um, was this element that there's a whole genre of based around writers and filmmakers even that focus on the twist at the ending of books in the suspense genre, and it's almost a thing unto itself. And I want to know if that is something that you now have to think about before you even start a new novel.
Yeah, it's so because there are a lot of ways to have a twist, right? So you can have a twist that's just a natural twist. It's just how the plot unravels. Who done it can have a huge twist at the end that the butler did it or the butler didn't do it, and that's just a regular plot twist that a skilled author will have enough misdirection and a lot of suspects, and will put the pieces together in a way that it could be many different people, and then you finally get the last clue and it's all cleverly pieced together. And that's sort of a traditional plot twist that all different genres use to add some element of surprise to a book. And I feel as though Don't Look for Me is that kind of book. The twist at the end is not what I call sort of a tricky twist, and I don't mean that derogatively at all. It's an awesome word. It's the psychological thriller genre. The way we came to think of it after Gone Girl exploded was to have a tricky twist, which basically includes either an unreliable narrator, so your narrator is lying to you or is somehow mentally compromised, either by some kind of mental illness or an impairment like an addiction. The Woman in the Window is a perfect example. The entire narration is a character with agoraphobia who's highly medicated and then self-medicated. And the other types of twists can involve assumptions that readers make about timeline being linear. So if someone's telling us a story and it's A, B, C, D could actually be F, or D could be Z. It's just told in a different order, but our brain processes it as though D is after C and before E. So that can be used. And then also you can have a really clever twist by giving characters different names and different narrations in the book. And it can either be by someone who has a double personality, or somebody who it's them as a child and now they're older and they have a different, they don't go by their nickname anymore. So many techniques to have tricky twists that play on our assumptions. So it's amazing that all of these tools exist to give readers a super fun experience. And I think it's great. I've used them all. I plan to use them in the future. So, be warned.
Well, in Don't Look for Me, it is sort of a dueling point of view exercise between Molly, who is a grieving mother, and I'm trying not to give away too much either here, but she vanishes in a storm one night when her car runs out of gas. And she leaves. There's a note found at a casino saying, "I'm fine. Don't look for me." But particularly her daughter Nicole, who is troubled herself, and feels a little guilt over the way she has treated her mom while they're all going through a grieving process. She is not satisfied with that, maybe more than everyone else, and begins to hunt for her mom beyond what she perceives law enforcement to doing. And I'm explaining all that in case those of you out there haven't read the setup yet. And I think what's most fascinating to me that I was not aware of, Wendy, is that I was aware that thousands of people in America go missing every year. I wasn't aware that a lot of them just do it because whatever it is about their life is overwhelming, and they take it upon themselves. It's not kidnapping. It's not, secret drowning in the lake or whatever. Did you know about that? And how did you explore the idea of just, I've had it, I'm going to vanish? And how did you make it work in this?
So it actually started with a moment that I had, and I always have to preface this by saying I did not want to walk away from my life. It wasn't like that bad, but it was akin to the feeling you have when your cell phone is malfunctioning and there's like a part of your brain that's like, throw it against the wall, smash it. And it's so instantaneously that you don't even really notice that the other part of your brain creeps in and says, no, that's $700, and your stuff might not be in the cloud yet, like all your photos and your contacts. And it happens so quickly that you swallow the frustration and you just deal with it. And that's a struggle between the emotional part of the brain and the rational thinking part of the brain. And they're always in sort of competition, right? When we have an emotional reaction. And I was actually driving on a road similar to where I put Molly Clark, which is why I put her there, because I became very attached to this setup that I actually experienced. And it was a hard time I was going through in my life. It had been a really bad day, something involving one of my kids that I couldn't control and I couldn't fix and I couldn't make better, and I felt powerless, and I was driving and going down a rabbit hole of, when you're driving and you can't distract yourself and you have something on your mind, it's like the worst thing. So I was in this rabbit hole of feeling powerless and sad, and I was getting gassed and dwelling, and I saw this road that went off in the distance, and I'm telling you, my brain had that, throw walk down the road. And then I was like, what? And then immediately I was like, oh my gosh, that was so weird. And I drove home, and I came home immediately and started researching this. And this is where I discovered the psychology behind this fight between the two parts of the brain. And when the emotional part of the brain gets fired up, it's actually triggering our fight or flight impulses. And I'm telling you, everyone right now has experienced that in the past, like 8 months. We have all experienced this heightened sense of anxiety. We can't do anything about it. We can't fight. We can't flee. All we can do is stay in place and freeze. And it's not what our brains want to do. They want to go and do something to get us out of this. And it triggers anxiety. When it's very acute, the emotional part of the brain can actually get so fired up that it overpowers the thinking part of the brain, and they call that emotional hijacking. And so this is what happens to Molly. So I decided I had to write a book about this because I found it fascinating. And then I discovered what you said, which is most missing person cases are the result of a walk away. Many of them are well thought out. They are the result of abuse or something going on in a person's life that they want to get away from. Sometimes they just want to walk away from debt or, go off with a lover or whatever. But a lot of times it's because of something, that's also well thought out. But other times it is the result of incredible emotional pain that a person can no longer tolerate. And this is what happens to Molly. So I decided to combine that. And I thought, how interesting would it be to put someone in that situation where she does start to walk away, but she comes to her senses. But by the time she does, she's in a place where she needs to get a ride back to her car, and she gets abducted. And that's the setup of the book. It happens in the first chapter, so no spoilers there. And so I gave her this really powerful emotional backstory that hopefully most readers will empathize with and understand why she has this moment. And then I used that to bring in the evidence that her family comes to accept, which is that she walked away. So after a 4-day search, and they find the note, and they give up. And they don't give up completely, but they stop actively looking. They have a private investigator who they're keeping an eye on her credit cards. They want to find her, but they no longer feel that it's foul play. But of course, we know it's foul play because I wrote it in in a split narration with a split time frame. So you're actually with Molly, and you actually know what is happening to her minute by minute, day by day. And then you're also with Nicole, her daughter, 2 weeks later, when she finds out that her mother may actually have been abducted. There's a new lead that comes in, and she's the only one who believes it. And she goes back to this eerie town to search for her mother at all costs. So that split of the narration and the ability to be with Molly and know where she is ramps up the suspense, because I think the reader wants to just reach into every single chapter and tell the character what they just learned from the other character in the chapter before. So there's this constant cycling of knowing something, wanting to tell it to the character and save them, and then learning something new from that character, and it just keeps going until the book ends. So it's a lot. It's meant to be a really intense, immersive page turner.
Well, it is that, and this is something you mentioned. It's been a rough year for everybody, and when the virus started becoming as big as it did, and we've got a big political divide in this country, a lot of people were saying, I need a break. I need a break. And then, but oddly enough, as people in the book business and television and film found out, a lot of people are actually seeking out horror and crime novels and thrillers. I don't know whether the psychology is, well, somebody's got it worse than I do, or what, or whether they empathize. But obviously, you started writing "Don't Look for Me" before this all came down, I would expect. Mm-hmm. As the process went along, did you come to that realization that people are going to seek this out? And if so, you balance this on a very emotional family hook. So you have the suspense on the one hand, which we all are seeking. We want to be lost in that. But on the other end of that is this family's been through a lot. Was that sort of a tightrope you had to walk down?
So I personally believe that the best entertainment combines both. It is both. It doesn't have to be horror. It can be anything, but it moves. It's fast paced. It doesn't give you unnecessary information. Doesn't linger too long in a scene. Once you've got it, you move on. But also, you have to be emotionally invested in the characters, I think, to truly escape. And that's what we want to be doing. We want to escape. And when the book came out, the preview copies actually came out in March. They were sent out in March, right before the shutdown, which was so fortunate because all of the reviewers, all of the bloggers, like, I don't know how many they sent out, but it was a lot. Everybody had the book, and I started seeing reviews coming in as early as April from bloggers and on Goodreads and all of these places that were saying, "Oh my gosh, this is your best book ever. We love this book." And I was like, "Really?" Because I love all my books. So someone telling you they like one of your kids better than the others. But I and it kept building, and I kept hearing this over and over. Like, this gave me the escape I needed. Like, from the first chapter, I was completely hooked in, and I didn't stop until it was over. And then I came out feeling a sense of relief, because it's like having a good night's sleep. You are completely escaping from your reality, which right now for all of us is really troubling, but you're also experiencing the emotions that are just simmering in all of us. So in this book, you get to follow this woman who's fighting for her family, actively fighting, and her daughter who's out in this eerie town, like, trying to figure out who's lying to her and who's not, and she's on the move, and she's just like hell-bent to find her mother, and you get to experience the sort of the fear, the anxiety, all these things, and the sadness that they are dealing with, which I had to weave in. And you're right, it was a very careful like construction to not bog the plot down with too much backstory, but to give readers enough backstory and enough sort of emotional moments that the characters are having, that you understand the depth of the despair at what they've lost, 5 years before, that they've never gotten over. But there's something about that combination in this book, which I did not foresee. I wrote it over a year and a half ago, but at this time in our collective lives, it is providing that escape. And I saw one of my, an article about the book had a quote from the person who wrote the screenplay for Psycho. And he was basically saying that horror and this isn't really horror, but scary movies, scary books, things that allow us to feel fear in something that doesn't have to do with our lives, actually allows us to sort of get that feeling out and release it in a way that's safe. But when it's out, it's out. It's not, and so you feel, it's like crying at a sad movie, and you come out and you're like, oh, it was so sad. And then you feel better because you cried. It's a similar.
Therapeutic.
It's therapeutic to feel.
Yeah.
You need to feel, So I thought that, I read that and I thought that is so true. When I watch something that really pulls me in and moves me and makes me feel something, I want to feel something when I have entertainment, any kind of entertainment. Because feeling things we don't normally feel in our everyday lives, or that we can feel safely, more safely than in our everyday lives, is incredibly cathartic, I think.
Yeah. Wendy, one thing I have learned over the course of doing not just this book club, but several book events, as you said, like at Mohegan Sun and stuff over the years, is that a lot of folks in this audience are would-be writers, or maybe are writers, who are fascinated by not just the craft and the process, but the business of publishing. And I want to know, something tumultuous happened to the publishing business when self-publishing and ebooks came into being. And at that point, suddenly everybody who wanted to write a book could actually see hold a published book in their hand. And on the one hand, as someone who has tried, anybody that finishes a book, I have all the respect in the world for them. It is not easy to write a book. At the same time, when that happened, suddenly publishing houses and agencies, literary agencies, became overwhelmed with people sending queries or whatever, and suddenly it became really hard to get anybody's attention. You got someone's attention. You got an agent. You are an established best-selling author, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was an easy road, particularly to establish oneself in thrillerdom, if you want to call it that, or psychological suspense, because while you're really good at it, there are a lot of people that also want to do it. So if you would take a minute and talk to folks about your process and your experiences and how you came to pull all this off. Talent notwithstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote 10 years before I became, I don't know what to call it. It's not a successful author, but before I became a full-time working author, where I could actually, where this became my lucrative full-time job. That took 17 years from the first moment when I thought I would try to write a book. And I was not trained as an author, or as a writer of fiction. I was an attorney, so I knew how to write, but I didn't know how to write books, novels. And so I had a steeper learning curve, and I was having children, and it was really a hobby with intention for several years. But I did get published actually back in 2008 and 2009 with two books that we don't talk about. They're like my ugly stepchildren. It's horrible, but they're not even on my website. But I think they're great books. They're just a different genre, and we don't want to confuse people. But they're fiction. I don't use the term women's fiction. That they're fiction about women's lives, And I think they're great books, but they are a different genre, and they got published. And I thought, wow, like I've made it. And, I had no idea what the business was like. And they didn't, they sold like copies to all my friends and family. So thank you everyone out there who bought a copy. And, that doesn't make a career. And that's what is so, I think, surprising to people, is that you get an agent, and that's exciting, and that's very hard, but it's exciting. And then you get a publishing deal for not a lot of money maybe. And that's exciting because you're going to be published. And then the book doesn't sell well. And then maybe another one doesn't sell well. And then you're done. And that is happening more and more because there are so many authors out there now. Like you said, you can start, there's so many avenues that there's not a deterrent factor anymore that, oh, I'm not published, I'll give up. Instead, people will self-publish until they get an agent and until they, get a traditional publishing contract, and they'll just keep at it. And so it's extremely competitive. And as a result, publishers can afford to sort of buy a lot of books at a low advance and see what works and see what doesn't, and then move on. Because there's a lot of inventory out there. I was very fortunate. I kept working. I went back to practicing law after my kids were all in school, and this was not my full-time job until the agent I have now, who I think I signed with in like 2013 or 14, suggested that I try writing a thriller. And it was after great frustration. I tried to write another fiction book and wasn't working. She didn't think she could sell it. It was too dark. It was not this, not that. It just wasn't fitting anywhere. And I said, okay, well, what will sell? And this is, a lot of writers will cringe hearing me say this, but I needed to know. I needed to know if I should keep trying to be a writer, or I should really focus on my law practice, because I couldn't keep doing both and raise 3 kids as a single mom. It was not going to work. It was not going to work. So this was going to be my last book. And I asked her, what will sell? My writing ability, my background. What do you think I could write that everyone will want to buy and everyone will want to read? And she said, the next Gone Girl. And that's when I just put my business hat on, and I took all of my skills. I put all my skills that I learned about writing. I read as many of these, the Gone Girl, Girl on a Train. I dissected them. I read them like I was dissecting a frog in 8th grade. I was analyzing, what is it? What is it that's different? What are the elements? And then I had this idea that I'd been carrying around, which I was very fortunate that I had this idea, and it forced me to come up with a twist on the unreliable narrator that hadn't been done before. And all those things came together, plus the psychology I learned practicing as a family law attorney. All of that I brought to bear. And it was just like a storm the perfect storm at the perfect time. It hit the wave, that was coming through, and I was very lucky. So I had, what do they say about success? Is it's being preparation matched with opportunity, right? So when the opportunity comes and you're prepared and you can ride the wave. So that was my experience. I don't know how useful it is to other writers, except to say that, you have to build your craft, and you have to have original ideas, and you have to be creative, and you have to have a voice. You can't just copy what other people have done, because anyone can do that. So yes, you do. There is that whole write what you feel, write what you know, write your passion, but you have to also look at what's selling and look at what people are reading and what they're enjoying and the types of books that they are consuming. And you have to have an eye to that. And if you can marry those two things together at the right time, you increase your chances of breaking through on the business side.
And I think one thing I have so much respect for you for, because I feel the same way, is that you are unabashedly. I mean, there are the quote unquote literary authors out there, the Ian McEwans and Margaret Atwood and stuff, and all power to them. All I don't understand some of it. Am I ruining everything by admitting that I don't like? I don't know how many of you made your way through uh, Ulysses, and I haven't got there yet. But I can sit down and read this stuff and enjoy it. And there's a real art to it. It is not just you say you studied all the Gone Girl and the Girl on the Train, and there is, I guess, there's a template, I suppose one could say, but that does not mean that you are sacrificing skill or art, if you want to put it that way. And I think that there are people out there that don't see it that way. And I guess what I'm saying is I applaud you for it. And there is a real art to it, if you want to call it genre fiction.
Yeah.
Do you dislike that phrase, genre fiction?
I don't think it's something that are not like me. It's part of my world, and it's if I could just sit down and write whatever I felt like anytime. And have it sell and have everybody be like, yay, it's Wendy's book, then that would be awesome. What's interesting is that even within my repertoire of books and within this genre, there's a lot of variety. And it all comes down to structure. It comes down to the types of twists that are used. I think what sets it apart in terms of being psychological suspense is that it tends to be more intimate, and the plots tend to focus more on relationships and things going on within families, within parent-child relationships, within romantic relationships. Once they start getting political or into the legal realm, they start to become more legal thrillers, and just in terms of how we talk about them. So there's some of that I think is bothersome because, you feel like, oh, if I add a cop, now it's a procedural and it's no longer a psychological thriller. And I feel like those lines really don't need to be there. But I think it's there's a lot of movement in this within this genre. And over the summer, I was so fortunate to write an Audible original, which is actually out now. It's called Hold Your Breath. And it's a novella, and it's just like a 2.5 hour listen on Audible. And it's a spinoff of All Is Not Forgotten. And it was so amazing because I had been carrying around an idea for the next chapter in my main character's life. His name is Dr. Forrester. And when I sat down to write him, I hadn't written an unreliable narrator like that since I wrote him. And it was like coming home. It was joyful. I don't know how else to describe it. Because maybe it was my first foray into the genre, and because I felt so free to just write him however I saw him and felt him, and to structure it the way that I saw it, that it needed to be structured. It was just seamless, joyful. I loved it. I would write him, every book, but people don't want to read him in every book. He's a lot to take. And he's a lot to take. Not everybody likes him. But he's an interesting character, and it's getting great reviews and people are enjoying it. And I loved writing it, but I'm, going back now and looking at what people are saying they really enjoy about Don't Look for Me. And it's not that I'm going to copy that, but I listen to my readers. And when they tell me this is your best book, please give me more, please give me more. I want to please my audience. So I have so many stories to tell, so many ideas in my head. What they're enjoying is the way that I structured it and the way I told the story. And so I'm trying to, really think about how I can, picking a story that I want to tell and then finding a way to tell it in a way that will give readers this experience that they're enjoying. There's nothing better than having a reader tell me that they, that this book allowed them to forget all of 2020, for example, for 6 hours.
Right.
It's an amazing feeling that I wrote something that allowed someone to escape and feel a sense of joy by being scared and by attaching to characters, and that it was, enjoyable to them. That's a great feeling.
I love that, and I love now I don't know about. Well, let me phrase it this way: do you ever have characters surprise you? And I don't mean in terms of how the book might turn out, but in Don't Look for Me, for example, I was completely entranced by Nicole's story, because you gave her some issues to deal with that I think, I don't know, but they made me very worried about her for a lot of reasons. And I thought, I wonder if you would ever revisit her down the road, or any other character from an earlier book, because maybe out of nowhere, as you were writing, you went, wow, this Nicole, or whomever it might be, has taken on special to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I love her. She is, she was in this trauma happened, and the teenage brain is not equipped to really process trauma and to it's not a mature brain. And so she turned to alcohol, she turned to boyfriends, she became like a runner. She runs all the time. She can't fill these hollow spaces. So yeah, there's a lot of angst there, and a lot of damage that was done from what happened, and from it happening to her when she was 16, and now she's 21. And but here's the thing about writing my characters into another book. Most of my characters are civilians. So I've written the first book had a psychiatrist. He shows up again in this latest novella, and he's someone I can carry forward because the type of work he does lends itself to criminal cases or to nefarious situations.
Right.
So while in the first book it sort of did involve him a little bit and his family, this next book, the overarching plot had nothing to do with him. He was helping solve a crime, and he's someone that I could bring forward in a series or in another book. And in Emma and the Night, I have a forensic psychologist, and that I have thought about writing her again because, once again, she's a professional in the field. So the other two books, The Night Before and Don't Look for Me, all involve civilians, and I feel as though taking these people that I have just put through something so horrible and then put them through another psychological thriller. I feel how unlucky are these people? Like, I guess you could take someone like Nicole and make her still so damaged and so so flawed, emotionally flawed, that she could get herself into another little jam down the road. But to make it a full-on thriller, it could be done, but to me it's I feel like I've put them through this horrible situation, and they come out on their side, and not, don't want to give away spoilers to the ending, but there's some resolution. And but I don't rule it out, because they are damaged characters, and she is young. So, and there is another character in the book who's young that people have, Alice, for those of you who have read it, and those of you who might read it, that, she has some growing up to do, and she's clearly on a path that could lead to a thriller down the road. So I don't rule that out at all.
I worry about Alice. She's got some tough stuff to overcome there.
Yeah, well, she's not going to, because she's a sociopath in the making, and this is, that's how I wrote her. That's how I designed her. It was not by accident. She's not evil. She's not possessed by the devil. She is a classic 9-year-old sociopath. And I say, I don't know where she would end up on the spectrum of sociopathic illnesses. She may just have a mild personality disorder. She might be a narcissist. She might be a serial killer, but she's headed in that direction because of the trauma and the damage done to her in her early childhood. And that's, how I depicted her is appropriate for her age and how that mental illness would manifest itself in a 9-year-old child. So you get to see what a sociopath in the making looks like when she's 9 years old.
Well, she's creepy. I don't mind telling you.
They are, yes, that is accurate. Yes, creepy.
I wasn't sure where, without spoiling it for anybody, I wasn't sure where some of that Jello was intended to be to end up. But now I see that it's now 40 minutes into this. Okay, there's Sherry.
Here I am.
Do we have some questions?
We do have some questions, and I think Alice maybe deserves her own book going forward when she grows up, if she does become a full-fledged psychopath. We do have some audience questions. So Gerald would like to know if you know the ending before you start writing and work your way towards it.
Sometimes I know sometimes I just know who is the culprit. And in this book, for example, I did know who the culprit was, but the original 100 pages and outline had a different motivation and had other bad actors involved who got written out, and the motivation changed and the setup changed. It was still the same bad actor, but all of that changed. And there's one character who I never knew what to do with. I knew what I should do with her. And then I did something. And so it's hard to talk about without spoiling, but that piece of the ending, I did not know. And I just left it open in my mind because I didn't want to not be writing. I didn't want to get bogged down in, in plotting, and because I knew it was something I could take care of later and I could weave through and write in. So when I finally decided what to do with her, I did have to go back and change some things around to support that twist at the end. But I did know the bad actor. And so usually I know where I'm headed. Some books have, like Emma and the Night has a big twist at the end that really required the entire book to be structured around it. And it really was structured to give that ending the biggest bang that I could. It was all about the ending. And that's not the case with every book. It could be any of the act. I could have changed who did it. It wouldn't necessarily have mattered. It wouldn't have changed the suspense or the emotional appeal of the characters or what they were going through. So it depends book to book. But I'm a plotter, so I do plot very meticulously. And when something changes, I go back and I change what I've written, and then I change the plot. I change the outline going forward, so I know where I'm going. And that probably takes more time than just sort of going by the seat of my pants. But I have to. It's the only way that I can work.
Great, thank you. So we have another question from Susan, who is one of our local author friends, and she'd like to know what attracted you to this twist thriller genre. Is this the kind of book that you like to read?
It is the kind of book I like to read. I actually was a huge John Grisham fan back in my earlier years when I was a lawyer. I've always been drawn to dark dramas in television and film. Especially ones with psychological twists and psychological appeal, darkness in the characters. And by darkness, I don't mean like evil. It's really what fascinates me is the emotional fallout from trauma, from people who are damaged in some way. I'm not huge on serial killer plots and serial killer shows. I've written them, but I don't typically consume them. I'm more interested in people who have shades of gray, who are who have had something happen. There's fallout. They're complicated. They sometimes do good things, sometimes do bad things. They're conflicted. They're in pain. I don't know why I love that stuff. So psychological thrillers are definitely up my alley because they have all of those things. So yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, and we have another question. I think this is also from Susan. Ann Tyler wrote a book about a woman walking away from her life. It was a much quieter look at this phenomenon, I suspect, than your book, which definitely it is, or was. Do today's readers demand more action and suspense than readers did 3 decades ago?
Oh, I think absolutely they do. I think that it's apparent in all of our entertainment. I have 3 children who are now, 2 of them in their 20s and one is 17. And I can distinctly remember different stages of their lives where I've thought, ooh, now they're old enough to watch The Breakfast Club. Now they're old enough to watch, some movie that I loved at their age. And I would sit down and watch it. And I would be watching it with them and thinking, oh, this is so they're still great movies, but they move so much slower. And the dialogue is not edgy as we're used to. Everything is different. It's slower. The scenes aren't shifting as quickly. The story isn't being told in layers, flashbacks and forwards, and it was. I've noticed this over and over. And even if you look at the phenomenon of Hamilton, right? That is that show was so captivating. And one of my other favorite shows is Les Mis. And I was thinking, this is basically has all the components of Les Mis, but it is told in this like fast paced, with the music is so different. And it's you have to listen to every word or you will miss the story. It's not the lyrical, dramatic, beautiful, but a different pace, even in the way that Broadway shows are being told the stories on stage. So I think we have definitely we have changed the way we receive our storytelling across all formats: television, film, books, music, Broadway. It's fascinating. And I don't think there's going back because this is now what our brains enjoy. It's, it's like having a fine wine and going back to, back to
a farm.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how we are progressing. Our brains are progressing. And this is now what they enjoy. I truly believe that. And I don't think it's a bad thing. We're just, we're progressing in the way that we tell stories.
Great. And then we have another one. Chris would like to know if you could talk more about the balance in thrillers between pacing and emotional connection between the characters. Do you write more background scenes, so to speak, than you ultimately include as a means of getting to know your characters better?
It's so hard to balance it. And in this book, Molly's chapters were much easier to write. They're written in first person, so it's a very close narration. And she's in one spot. She's being held captive, and she's not being tortured or anything like that. It's just she's not free to leave, and she has to suss out her captors to figure out why she's there. If they're going to let her out. Then she finds out her daughter's nearby, so she's trying to escape, trying to save her daughter somehow, manipulate everybody around her. So she's got some work to do, but there's also some time there to dive into what she's feeling in her captivity. And that's interesting because we want to know how she's feeling. And readers expect to slow down and be immersed in her pain and her suffering, and then go back in time, how it relates to when she, lost her child 5 years before, and all the pain she's felt from that. Nicole's chapters were so much harder to construct because she had to do all the fact finding. She's got to go meet this guy and that woman, and then get a ride here and a ride there and find out this clue and that clue. She had so much stuff that she had to get done in her chapters that I had to have her do in the chapters, but I wanted readers to connect to her. So I would try things out, like, okay, I have a moment here where she could have a reflection about her mother and what a great mother she was. And, oh, I can sneak in a little text exchange with her brother, and I can make that poignant. Or here's a phone call with her father, and I can have her have some internal thoughts about her father. And then I'd read it and think, oh my God, that should not be there. It slows down the action. So those chapters were so hard. It's a constant balancing act, I think, to not slow down the action, not make it feel unnatural. Like, why is she thinking about her dad when she's running for her life through the woods? Like, that's not where that belongs. It needs to go clearly somewhere else. And figuring out where to put those little moments and to make them count, to not drag them out, to make them, count. Like one vignette, one moment that will speak to everyone, that will tell everyone she loves her brother. One little exchange to tell everyone that she loves her mother, that she loves her father, that she loved her life, that she wants to get her family back. How can I say that in as little page space as possible so we can keep moving?
Great. And can you tell us what you're working on next? If you are working on something, or are you taking a pandemic break?
No, I wrote the novella over the summer. I'm not taking a break. I did take a break, mostly because I wanted to assess where, what direction to go in, because Don't Look for Me got such a great response, and really the strongest response that I've had from readers in terms of what they have told me. So I don't know, what sales ultimately will look like given the pandemic, but in terms of what my readers are telling me and my reviews, I'm trying to take that to heart. And so I have all these plots and stories in my head. I always have a bunch of things that I want to pull out and write, and just deciding which one and how to make it work. So I actually am a few chapters into a new book. I think I've picked my horse to back, and now I'm just plowing ahead, and we'll see. I usually will do like 100 pages and then see what my people think, if I'm on the right track, and if everyone's on board, then I'll move ahead. So
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all look forward to your next book, whatever it is. And I want to thank you both, and also make sure I get that in the camera. Don't forget to buy Don't Look for Me. You can use the buy the book, the green link at the bottom of the page, or you can go to banksquarebooks.com and just order it right off the website, and we will either ship it to you, or you can come to the store and pick it up. We will have signed book plates available in the book. And I thank you both. This was great. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much.
See you all next time.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
Great. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Night.